Ambassador had never felt so small. She stood in the great hall of the Galactic Assembly, surrounded by beings from 100 different worlds. Some floated in the air. Others walked on 6 legs. A few existed as nothing more than glowing clouds of light, and all of them were staring at her. In her hands she held a document that should not exist. It was humanity's official invitation to join the Council of 12, the ancient body that had ruled the galaxy for 40,000 years. For 3 centuries, humans had been told they were not ready. They were a young species, primitive and dangerous. They needed more time to prove themselves. But the document in its hand said otherwise. According to the official seal and the signatures of 12 council members, humanity had been approved for full membership 287 years ago. Someone had hidden the truth. The whispers around her grew louder. Translators buzzed and clicked as delegates tried to make sense of what they were seeing. Kept her face calm, but inside her heart was racing. She had come to the assembly expecting another rejection. Instead, she had uncovered something that could change everything. High Chancellor stepped forward from his elevated platform. He was one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. His 4 arms moved with practiced grace as he adjusted his ceremonial robes. His compound eyes, each one containing thousands of tiny lenses, fixed on with an expression she could not read. For 300 years, they had served as humanity's mentors. They had guided humans through their provisional period, always promising that full membership was just around the corner. They had been patient teachers and generous friends. Now wondered if they had been something else entirely. "This is wonderful news," said, his voice smooth and warm. "A clerical error, nothing more. We will correct this immediately and welcome our human friends to the council with full honors." The delegates relaxed. Some even applauded, but had spent 20 years as a diplomat. She knew how to read people, even alien ones, and what she saw in his eyes was not joy or embarrassment. It was fear. That night returned to her quarters on the orbital station that served as humanity's embassy. She was tired but could not sleep. Something about the day's events bothered her. The discovery had been too convenient. The old keeper of records had died just 3 days ago, and his replacement had found the hidden document within hours. It felt planned. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime from her personal terminal. Someone had sent her an encrypted message. The sender was anonymous, which should have been impossible on the heavily secured assembly network. Opened the message and read the words that appeared on her screen. "They are already moving against you. The vote tomorrow is not about membership. It is about elimination. Find the Axiom Archive. Find out what humanity really is. Trust no one from the council." Before she could respond, the message deleted itself, leaving no trace it had ever existed. Stood there for a long moment trying to process what she had read. Elimination. What did that mean? And what was the Axiom Archive? She did not have time to wonder. Her quarter's security system suddenly screamed a warning. 3 figures appeared from nowhere, stepping out of the air itself as their phase cloaks deactivated. They were dressed in black combat suits. Their 4 arms each held a weapon. Assassins. Had no time to think. She grabbed the nearest object, a decorative chair made of alien wood, and threw it at the closest attacker. The chair struck him in the chest, and he stumbled backward. The second assassin fired but was already moving. She dropped to the floor and rolled behind her bed. Another shot burned through the mattress above her head. His hand found a piece of the broken chair, a leg that had snapped off when it hit the first attacker. She gripped it tight. The third assassin came around the bed, weapon raised. Did not hesitate. She drove the chair leg into the soft tissue beneath his chin. That made a horrible sound and fell. The second assassin hesitated, surprised by the ferocity of her attack. That hesitation cost him everything. Pulled the weapon from the dead assassin's hand and fired twice. The second attacker dropped. The first assassin, still recovering from the throne chair, tried to raise his weapon, was faster. She crossed the room in 3 steps and hit him in the throat with the chair leg. He collapsed, choking. Stood in the middle of her destroyed quarters, breathing hard. 3 assassins lay around her. 2 were dead. 1 was dying. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt strangely calm. Something inside her had awakened during the fight, something old and powerful. Her movements had been too fast, too precise. She had never been trained for combat, yet she had killed 3 professional assassins with a broken piece of furniture. What was happening to her? Knelt beside the dying assassin. His compound eyes were dim, his breathing shallow. She pushed up the sleeve of his combat suit and found what she was looking for. On his inner wrist was a tattoo, a symbol made of interlocking circles and strange angular lines. She had never seen this symbol before, but somehow, in a way she could not explain, she recognized it. The symbol stirred something deep in her memory, something that felt older than her own life. The assassin died, stood and looked out the window at the stars beyond. 300 years of lies, hidden documents, assassination attempts, and now this strange symbol that felt like a memory she had never made. The anonymous message had been right. The Council was not welcoming humanity. They were trying to destroy them. But why? Made her decision quickly. She could not stay here. The assembly was compromised and more assassins would come. She needed to find the Axiom Archive, whatever that was. She needed to discover what humanity really was and why the Council was so afraid. She gathered what supplies she could carry and disabled the security cameras outside her quarters. As she slipped into the corridors of the orbital station, she passed a window overlooking the great hall where she had stood just hours ago. The galaxy stretched out before her, billions of stars burning in the darkness. Somewhere out there was the truth. Somewhere out there were the answers to questions she had not even known to ask. Had come to the assembly as an ambassador. She left as something else entirely. A seeker of forbidden knowledge, a survivor of impossible odds, and perhaps, if the symbol on the assassin's wrist meant what she thought it meant, something far more than human. The conspiracy had shown its face and intended to tear it apart. Escaped the orbital station with help from the last person she expected. Her name was, and she was, a species known throughout the galaxy for their perfect memory and their dedication to preserving knowledge, but was different from other. She had been exiled from her, stripped of her titles, and forbidden from ever entering a library again. Her crime had been asking questions about humanity. I was a senior archivist, explained as their stolen courier vessel jumped through hyperspace. She was small and covered in soft gray fur, with large dark eyes that seemed to hold centuries of sadness. I had access to records that few beings ever see. When humans made first contact 300 years ago, I was curious. I wanted to learn about this new species. Watched the swirling colors of hyperspace through the viewport. What did you find? Nothing, said, and that was the problem. Every file about humanity was sealed under the highest classification, reserved for existential threats. I pushed for access. I filed requests. I asked questions. And they exiled you for that. Turned her large eyes toward. Your species is not listed as dangerous, ambassador. You are listed as impossible. That word appeared in every sealed file I managed to glimpse. Impossible. The Council does not fear what humans might do. They fear what humans might be. The stolen ship was small and fast, designed for carrying messages across the galaxy. Had taken it from a diplomat who would not be needing it anymore. She felt no guilt about this. After 3 assassination attempts in the hours since she had left the station, guilt seemed like a luxury she could not afford. While they traveled, told about the anonymous message in the Axiom Archive, the eyes went wide. The Axiom Archive is real, whispered. I thought it was a legend. It is said to be a network of hidden data vaults, maintained by monks who from galactic society thousands of years ago. They were supposedly the original keepers of knowledge before my people took over that role. How do we find them? I do not know, but the old keeper of records, the one who died before you received your invitation, he was studying something in his final days. Secret research that he shared with no one. Perhaps he left a trail. Nodded. She had already planned their first destination, the keeper's private residence on a moon in the outer territories. If there were clues to find, they would be there. But as they chased ghosts across the galaxy, the council was not standing still. Chancellor addressed the assembly 2 days after his escape. His voice was full of concern and regret. Humanity, he explained, had proven itself unstable and dangerous. Ambassador had murdered 3 security officers and fled with stolen technology. For the safety of all species, human space would be quarantined until a full investigation could be completed. The other delegates listened and nodded. Some protested, but their voices were drowned out by supporters. By the end of the session, the resolution had passed. Across human space, warships appeared at the borders of every colony. They came in peace, they said. They were there to protect humanity from outside threats during this difficult time. But the colonists saw the weapons pointed at their worlds. They understood what protection really meant. On Earth itself, Council technicians arrived to upgrade the planetary defense systems. They smiled and spoke of increased security. They did not mention the kill switches they installed in every weapon, every shield, every ship. With a single command from the Council, humanity's defenses would turn against them. Learned of these developments through intercepted communications. Each report made her more determined to find the truth. The Council was preparing for war against a species that did not even know it was in danger. The Keeper's residence was hidden on a small moon that did not appear on any official charts, and found it only by following a trail of coded messages hidden in obscure academic journals. The old Keeper had been clever, hiding his secrets in plain sight. The residence was empty, of course. The Keeper had been dead for weeks, but his research remained, scattered across dozens of data crystals and handwritten notes in languages that could not read. Could read them. Her perfect memory allowed her to translate ancient texts that had been forgotten for. As she worked through the Keeper's notes, her expression grew more and more troubled. He was tracing a pattern, she said finally. A genetic pattern, something hidden in the DNA of multiple species. But the pattern is incomplete in every species he studied. Fragments of something larger, like pieces of a broken mirror scattered across the galaxy. Every species has this pattern. Many species, perhaps most, but only one species has the complete pattern, looked up at humans. The final note in the Keeper's collection was a set of coordinates and a single phrase written in the oldest language had ever seen. She translated it slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. The children carry the seeds of the gods. One child carries them all. Find the monks, find the truth, before the Council finds you. The coordinates led to a dead world at the edge of known space, a planet called Axiom Prime. The name sent chills down spine. They arrived 3 days later. Axiom Prime was a tomb of a world, its surface covered in the ruins of a civilization that had died before any current species had evolved. Landed the ship near a structure that still stood, a massive tower that reached toward the dark sky. Inside they found the monks. They were not what expected. They were not any single species, but many, their bodies transformed over into something else entirely. They existed in a space between physical and spiritual, their forms flickering like flames in a breeze. "We have been waiting," the oldest monk said. His voice echoed in his mind rather than her ears. "Waiting for the one who carries the complete pattern, waiting for you, daughter of the precursors." And then they showed her the truth. 40,000 years ago, the galaxy had been ruled by a species called the precursors. They had been so advanced that they had achieved something no other species had ever managed. They had evolved past the need for physical bodies, becoming beings of pure thought and energy. But the transformation had been incomplete. When they ascended, they shattered. Their consciousness broke into billions of pieces that scattered across the galaxy, embedding themselves in the DNA of developing species. Every sentient being in the galaxy carried fragments of the precursors within them. But only humans carried the complete pattern. Only humans could potentially undergo the same transformation. Only humans could bring the precursors back. The Council of 12 had not been formed to govern the galaxy. It had been formed to ensure that the precursors never returned. For 40,000 years, they had watched and waited and suppressed any species that showed signs of awakening. And now, with humanity on the verge of discovering the truth, they were preparing to end the threat once and for all. Stood in the ancient tower, surrounded by the flickering forms of the monks, and felt the weight of 40,000 years of lies pressing down upon her. She was not just an ambassador. She was not just human. She was the key to something that terrified the most powerful beings in the galaxy. And they would do anything to destroy her. Had not meant to change the galaxy. She had simply touched the central crystal in the monk's tower and asked to see more of the records. But the crystal recognized something in her, something written in her blood and bones, something that had been waiting for 40,000 years. The Axiom Archive was not just a collection of knowledge, it was a key, and had just turned it. Across the galaxy, buried machines began to wake. On human colony worlds, ancient devices hidden deep beneath the ground started to hum with power. Strange lights appeared in the skies. The implants that every human received at birth, standard medical devices that regulated health and connected people to networks, began broadcasting signals that had not been used since the precursors fell. And humanity began to change. Felt it first as a tingling in her mind, like someone had opened a door she never knew existed. She could sense standing beside her, not just see her, but feel her presence as a warm glow of curiosity and concern. She could feel the monks around them, their ancient consciousnesses like slow-burning stars. She could feel the planet itself, the dead rock and the hidden machines, all connected in ways she was only beginning to understand. "What have you done?" asked, her voice filled with wonder and fear. Looked at her hands. They seemed the same as always, but she knew they were different now. She was different. "I woke something up, something that has been sleeping for a very long time." Across human space, others were experiencing the same changes. Some people found that they could sense the emotions of those around them. Others discovered they could see magnetic fields or hear radio waves as music. A few began to perceive time itself differently, seeing not just the present but glimpses of possible futures branching out before them. The changes were small at first, subtle enough that many people did not notice, but they grew stronger every day. On the colony world of New Helsinki, a 15-year-old girl named Sarah discovered that she could talk to machines. Not through keyboards or voice commands, but directly, mind to mind. The old precursor technology buried beneath her city answered her like a long-lost friend finally coming home. On the orbital stations around Mars, workers began to communicate without speaking, sharing thoughts and feelings in ways that words could never capture. They did not lose their individual identities. Instead, they gained something new, a connection that made them more than they had been alone. And on Earth itself, the oldest of the awakening humans began to remember, not their own lives but other lives, fragments of memories from the precursors themselves. They remembered building cities that floated among the stars. They remembered conversations that lasted centuries. They remembered the fear and hope of the final transformation, when the precursors tried to become something more and shattered themselves across the cosmos. Chancellor received reports of these changes with growing horror. His agents in human space told him about the strange behaviors, the impossible abilities, the ancient machines coming to life. Every report confirmed his worst fears. The precursors were returning. He called an emergency session of the Council of 12 and revealed the truth he had kept hidden for his entire career. The Council had always known about the precursor fragments in human DNA. They had spent 300 years keeping humanity isolated and controlled, hoping to suppress the awakening that seemed inevitable. They had failed. "We have no choice," told the other council members. "Humanity must be eliminated, all of them, every colony, every station, every ship. If even one human survives, the precursors will return through them. We cannot allow that to happen." Half the council agreed immediately. They had always been the strongest supporters of the anti-precursor policies. They had built their entire civilization on the technology left behind by the precursors, and they knew better than anyone what those ancient beings had been capable of. But the other half hesitated. The collective, a species of linked minds that acted as one, demanded proof. They had always been suspicious of influence on the council. They wanted to see evidence that humanity was actually dangerous, not just potentially dangerous. Had no time for debates. He ordered the fleet to move on human space immediately, without waiting for council authorization. He called it a protective intervention, a necessary action to prevent galactic catastrophe. They called it what it really was: genocide. The first warships arrived at the border colony of New Helsinki 7 days after activated the Axiom Archive. They came with overwhelming force, hundreds of ships against a handful of outdated human defenders. The commander broadcast his demands: immediate surrender, total disarmament, and the transfer of all humans to detention facilities for processing. The colonists refused. What happened next would be remembered for 10,000 years. Sarah, the 15-year-old girl who had learned to talk to machines, felt the ships in orbit above her. She felt their weapons charging, their targeting systems locking onto the cities below. She felt the fear of her people, the millions of minds suddenly aware that death was coming. And she felt something else, something vast and old and powerful, stirring beneath her feet. The precursor machines had not been built for war, but they had been built to protect, and they recognized the threat above. Sarah did not understand what she was doing. She simply reached out with her mind and asked for help. The machines answered. A pulse of energy erupted from the planet, invisible but overwhelming. It swept through the fleet in an instant, passing through shields and armor as if they did not exist. Every computer, every engine, every weapon system on every ship shut down simultaneously. 300 warships went dark and began to drift. The battle had lasted 18 minutes from the first shot to the final silence. They had fired everything they had. Not a single colonist had been harmed. The galaxy watched in shock. The Council had sent their greatest fleet to destroy a primitive species. That species had defended itself with a thought. Chancellor received the news in his private chambers on the council station. His 4 hands trembled as he read the reports. 300 ships disabled, crews unharmed but helpless, all from a single human child who had somehow connected with technology that should have been extinct for 40,000 years. The quarantine had been meant to contain a primitive species. Instead, they had caged a sleeping giant. And now it was awake. Watched the battle from Axiom Prime, feeling it through the new senses she was still learning to use. She felt Sarah's fear and determination. She felt the ancient machines responding to a call they had waited to hear. She felt the crews as their ships went dark, their confusion and terror and eventual relief when they realized they were still alive. The humans had not killed their attackers, they had simply stopped them. That restraint knew would matter. The galaxy was watching. If humanity had responded to genocide with genocide, they would have proven everything the Council believed about them. Instead, they had shown something else entirely. Power without cruelty, strength without destruction, the ability to defend without destroying. The precursors were returning, but perhaps thought that was not the catastrophe the Council feared. Perhaps it was something else entirely. Perhaps it was evolution. And perhaps, after 40,000 years of suppression and lies, the galaxy was finally ready to grow. The battle at New Helsinki changed everything, but it did not end the war. Chancellor refused to accept defeat. He called the disabled fleet a temporary setback and ordered more ships to gather at the borders of human space. If one attack had failed, he would launch 100 more, 1,000 more, whatever it took. But knew that more battles would only bring more death, and death was not what she wanted. She had felt the fear of the crews when their ships went dark. They were not evil beings. They were soldiers following orders, people with families and hopes and dreams, people who had been taught since birth that humanity was a threat to everything they loved. The real enemy was not it was the fear that drove them. Needed to understand that fear. She needed to know why the Council had spent 40,000 years suppressing the precursor legacy. Only then could she hope to end the conflict without destroying everyone involved. The monks on Axiom Prime told her where to find answers. There was one being in the galaxy who had actually known the precursors, who had witnessed their transformation and its terrible aftermath. This being was the oldest member of the Council of 12, a creature called the Silence. The Silence was not like other council members. It did not speak in words or vote in sessions or participate in debates. It communicated only through absence, through the things it chose not to say, through the weight of its attention and the depth of its withdrawal. No one knew what species the Silence had originally been. No one knew how old it really was. But everyone knew that when the Silence paid attention to something, that something mattered. Found the Silence at the edge of the galaxy, on a dying world where stars were going dark one by one. The planet had no name on any chart. Its surface was covered in ash and silence, the remains of a civilization that had burned itself out ages ago. The Silence was waiting for her. Had expected a monster or a god. Instead, she found something that looked almost human. The Silence stood at the edge of a great cliff, looking out at the fading stars. Its form flickered like a candle flame, sometimes solid, sometimes transparent, sometimes something in between. "I have been waiting for you," the Silence said. Its voice was not sound but meaning, words that appeared directly in its mind. "I have been waiting for 40,000 years." Approached slowly. Her new senses told her that the Silence was not dangerous, at least not in the way she had feared. It was old and tired and very, very sad. "You knew the precursors," she said. "You were there when they transformed." "I was there," the Silence agreed. "I watched them try to become gods. I watched them fail." And then the Silence showed her the truth. The precursors had not simply ascended to a higher form of existence. They had attempted something unprecedented, a transformation of their entire species from physical beings to creatures of pure consciousness. They believed they had found the secret to eternal life, to unlimited knowledge, to power beyond imagination. They were wrong. The transformation required perfect unity, every precursor mind joining together in a single moment of absolute connection. But the precursors were individuals with their own thoughts and fears and doubts. When the moment came, they could not achieve the unity they needed. Instead of ascending together, they shattered apart. The Silence showed what that shattering had looked like. A billion minds trying to become one, pulling in different directions, tearing themselves to pieces in the process. The energy released had been catastrophic. Entire solar systems had been destroyed. Species that had been the precursors' neighbors had been wiped out in an instant. And the precursor consciousness itself had fragmented into countless pieces that rained down across the galaxy, embedding themselves in the developing life forms on 1,000 worlds. The survivors, the species that had lived through the catastrophe, had formed the original council. They had sworn to prevent such a disaster from ever happening again. They would watch for signs of the precursor fragments awakening. They would suppress any species that showed potential for the same transformation. They would keep the galaxy safe. For 10,000 years, the Council served its purpose, the Silence said. We prevented several potential awakenings. We guided developing species away from dangerous paths. We believed we were protecting the galaxy. What changed? We did. The Silence's form flickered with something that might have been shame. Fear became control. Protection became suppression. We stopped trying to guide species and started trying to limit them. The Council forgot why it had been created. It remembered only the fear. Understood now. The species that had become the most powerful force on the Council had built their civilization on precursor technology. They had seen firsthand what that technology could do. Their fear was genuine, rooted in real experience with real dangers. But their response to that fear had corrupted them. Instead of helping humanity understand their heritage, they had hidden it. Instead of preparing humans for potential awakening, they had suppressed it. Instead of trusting, they had controlled. And now, when the awakening came anyway, they had no response except violence. There is something else, the Silence said. Something the Council does not know, something I have kept hidden for all these. Waited. The precursors did not fail completely. A small part of them achieved the transformation they sought. That part still exists, watching, waiting, hoping that one day their children would learn from their mistakes and succeed where they had failed. Their children. You, all of you. Every species that carries precursor fragments is a child of the precursors. You are not hosts for an alien consciousness. You are heirs to an ancient legacy. The fragments in your DNA are not invasive. They are inheritance. Felt the truth of this in her bones. She had never felt invaded or controlled by the changes happening inside her. She had felt expanded, awakened, more herself than ever before. And humanity. Humanity is special, the Silence admitted. Not because you are better than other species, because you carry the complete pattern. You are the catalyst. Your awakening is triggering awakenings in every species that carries precursor fragments. What is happening to you will soon happen to others. His eyes widened. She had assumed the changes were limited to humans. But if what the Silence said was true, the entire galaxy was about to transform. The carry fragments, she said slowly. Yes. Everyone on the Council. Yes. They are not just our enemies, they are our family. The Silences formed for a moment and saw something like hope in its ancient eyes. Now you understand. This was never about humanity against the galaxy. This is about the galaxy becoming what it was always meant to be. The precursors did not scatter their consciousness by accident. They planted seeds, seeds that are finally ready to grow. Stood at the edge of the cliff, looking out at the dying stars. Behind her, the Silence waited. Around her, the galaxy churned with war and fear and the beginnings of something wonderful. She had come seeking the truth about the Council's conspiracy. She had found something much larger. The galaxy was not ending. It was beginning. And humanity, the species that was never supposed to join the Council, would help lead the way. But first, she had to stop the war. She had to show thee and the Council that they did not need to fear what was coming. She had to give them a choice. Chancellor stood in the deepest chamber of the Council station, surrounded by machines that had not been activated in 40,000 years. His four hands moved across control panels that glowed with ancient light. His compound eyes reflected the terrible power that was about to be unleashed. The Omega Protocol. This was the last resort, the final option, the weapon that the original Council had created for exactly this situation. Hidden devices throughout the galaxy, buried on thousands of worlds, would activate simultaneously. They would target every being that carried precursor DNA and eliminate them in an instant. Billions would die. Entire species would cease to exist. The themselves, who carried their own precursor fragments, would be destroyed along with everyone else, but did not care about survival anymore. He cared only about preventing the return of the precursors. He had dedicated his entire life to this cause. He would not fail now. His hand reached for the final activation switch. "Stop!" His voice echoed through the chamber. She stood at the entrance, having arrived through methods that should have been impossible. The guards that had protected this place lay unconscious behind her, their minds gently pushed into sleep. Did not turn around. "You cannot stop this, human. The protocol will activate. The fragments will be destroyed. The galaxy will be safe." Safe from what? Walked forward slowly, her hands open and empty. Safe from evolution, safe from growth, safe from becoming something more than we are. Safe from destruction. Now turned and saw the madness in his eyes. "I have seen the records. I know what happened when the precursors tried to ascend. Billions died. Stars exploded. The galaxy itself almost tore apart. I will not allow that to happen again. It will not happen again. You cannot know that." "I can," stopped a few meters from the Chancellor, "because I understand something now that the original council never did. The precursors failed because they tried to force unity. They tried to make every mind become one, whether those minds wanted it or not. They did not fail because transformation is impossible. They failed because they did not give anyone a choice." His hand still hovered over the activation switch. "What difference does choice make?" "All the difference in the universe." Took another step forward. "I have felt the awakening, Chancellor. I have felt my mind expand and my senses grow, but I never lost myself. I never became something I did not want to be. The transformation that is happening now is not the same as what the precursors attempted. It is not forced unity. It is offered connection." Words spat. "Pretty words while you prepare to destroy everything we have built." "I am not trying to destroy anything. I am trying to help everyone grow." Reached out with her mind, gently, carefully, showing rather than telling. She let feel what she had felt, the expansion of consciousness, the deepening of understanding, the joy of connection without loss of self. For a moment the Chancellor hesitated. His hand trembled above the switch. Something in his compound eyes flickered, a hint of wonder breaking through the fear. Then he shook his head and slammed his hand down. The machines hummed to life. Across the galaxy, the hidden devices began to activate. In moments they would fire and billions of lives would end. Closed her eyes. She reached out with her mind, not to, but to everyone. To every human who had awakened, to every member of every species that carried precursor fragments. She reached out to Sarah on New Helsinki and two on their ship. She reached out to the collective and the archivists. She reached out to the soldiers in their warships and the council members in their chambers. She offered them a choice. Not forced unity, not mandatory transformation, just an invitation, an open door, a hand extended in welcome. Those who wanted to grow could grow. Those who wanted to stay as they were could stay. There was no right answer, no correct path. There was only freedom. Millions accepted. Humans and dozens of other species, all choosing to step through the door together. They did not become one mind. They became a network, a family, a constellation of individual lights that could shine alone or together as they chose. And as they connected, they reached into the Omega Protocol devices and simply turned them off, not with violence or force, but with understanding. The ancient machines had been built by beings who carried the same fragments, and those machines recognized their builders' children. They went quiet and still, their terrible purpose abandoned. Chancellor watched his weapon fail. He watched the screens that showed the awakening spreading across the galaxy. He watched species that had feared each other for reaching out in peace. "What have you done?" he whispered. "I gave them what you never would," replied. "A choice." Not everyone accepted the invitation. As a species, chose to reject the transformation. Their fear was too deep, their history too long. They sealed their borders and from galactic affairs, choosing isolation over connection. Others made the same choice. Some species wanted nothing to do with the precursor legacy. They were not punished for this decision. They were simply allowed to live as they had always lived, neighbors to the transformed but not part of them. But most beings chose to grow. They chose to expand their minds and deepen their connections. They chose to become something more than they had been alone. The Council of 12 dissolved. In its place arose a new form of governance, one based on consensus and connection rather than control and fear. Old borders became meaningless when minds could touch across light years. Old enemies became allies when they discovered they were literally family, children of the same ancient parents. Watched the new galaxy take shape and felt something she had not felt since before the conspiracy had been revealed. Hope. The silence came to her one last time, on a world where new stars were being born to replace the ones that had died. Its ancient form was fading now, its long vigil finally ending. "You succeeded where we failed," it said. "You found a way to transform without forcing unity. You found a way to grow without destroying." "I just gave people a choice," said. "They did the rest." That is what the precursors could not do. That is why they shattered. The silence's form flickered like a candle flame in a gentle breeze. They believed they could make everyone become one. You understood that true unity cannot be forced. It must be chosen, every day by every individual forever. Nodded, "Will you stay to see what comes next?" "My time is finished, but I am not afraid. The seeds we planted 40,000 years ago have finally grown. The children have become what the parents could not." The silence smiled, or did something that felt like a smile. "Take care of each other. Remember that connection is a gift, not a requirement. And never ever stop choosing to grow." Then the silence faded away and was alone. But not really alone. Never alone anymore. She could feel the vast network of awakened minds stretching across the galaxy, each one a unique voice in an endless song. She could feel humanity and 100 other species, all connected, all individual, all free. The conspiracy had lasted 40,000 years. It had been built on fear and maintained through control. It had kept the galaxy locked in place, unable to grow, unable to change, unable to become what it was meant to be. That time was over now. Humanity had been told they would never join the Council. Instead, they had helped build something better. They had shown the galaxy that evolution was not something to fear. It was something to embrace. In the new galaxy, among the new stars, a new civilization was taking its first steps. It would make mistakes. It would face challenges. It would sometimes stumble and fall. But it would never stop growing, never stop choosing, never stop reaching toward the light. And that, new, was exactly what the universe had been waiting for. The end was just the beginning.